Welcome, everybody, to Friday Fireside Chat with my delightful guest, Jennefer Witter. As we're all getting gathered up, a few housekeeping things to be aware of. Firstly, this is being recorded, so don't say or type anything that you do not wish recorded for posterity. We will play back the recording at a later point on my YouTube channel. You can find it there. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Rita McGrath, and I'm also on YouTube. And every Friday for the last few months, we've been doing these Friday Fireside Chats with delightful people with positive things to say about the world. And so I'm very, very delighted to be joined this morning by Jennefer Witter. Jennefer is an entrepreneur, runs her own company, has spoken in our Columbia Business School classes, and it's just a joy to have in my life. So welcome.
That's so sweet. I can say absolutely the same thing for you, Rita. Thank you.
So I thought, as we're getting started, people may not be aware of your story. So I thought it would just be interesting to who is this person and what does she do, and some tips perhaps for how you can share with other people what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely. Well, I am a lifelong New Yorker. I am a first generation American. My parents came here. My father came here just after the war, World War II. My mother came during the 1950s when she married my father. And they purposely chose this country. They didn't go to England because a lot of people in Jamaica would go to London, but they came to this country because of what they wanted for their future family, which was the opportunity to climb the mobile ladder. Education was critical for them. Neither of my parents finished what is considered in the United States high school. So they wanted to have their children not just get educated, but go to college and get a good job so that they wouldn't struggle like my parents did. And my father was a carpenter and my mother was a nurse. And at the age of 5, they divorced. And my mother always said that she got $2 million out of the divorce. And basically what she was saying is that I was 1 million and my sister was the other million. And it wasn't easy during those days. We moved from my father's house to a 1-bedroom apartment, and things were really tight. We were living in the South Bronx and all 3 of us were sleeping in one bed. But the one thing I can tell you is that my mother always had books in the house, and we had Compton's Pictured Encyclopedia. And I read all of them because as I was growing up, I have asthma and I had severe asthma. And there were times when I would miss 2-3 weeks of school simply because I could not get out of bed. But I did read, and my love of reading, my love of education just really dovetailed with what my mother anticipated for us. And I was able to go to Brooklyn Technical High School. I went to Fordham University, and I've been working in public relations since the 1980s. And I never had any desire to be an entrepreneur. But what I can tell you that my climb up the ladder in public relations was always very difficult. It never came smoothly. And so my last position outside of the Borland Group was at Ketchum Public Relations, where I was a vice president there. And around that time, my mother became very, very ill. And I lost her. It was a difficult passing. And then I had, we all had 9/11. And at the time of that, I was leading a tech division at Ketchum, and it virtually collapsed. And so with everything that was happening, I decided to move, just to quit. And I would say that if you can, everyone should try to take some time off. Because self-care is critical. And I can tell you from my own experience that for the 20-25 years at that time, all I did was work. And I really didn't have a personal life. And with my mother's passing, I realized that there was a huge void in my life, and I needed to create a life for myself that would extend beyond my mother because we were very, very close. And so when I was not able, but I decided to go back to work after a year. And I said, you know what, I really want to create an environment that I want to be in, because public relations can be very difficult. Everybody looks at Sex and the City and Samantha Jones. Do you remember, like, you know, she was always drinking Cosmos and having fun. And it was like,
The shoes, let's not forget the shoes.
the shoes with the 8-inch heels, and that's not PR. You know? So it can be very stressful. It's very demanding. And, you know, sometimes you're paired with clients that you really don't like. And I always had a reputation of getting paired with clients because I can work with difficult people. And they would always say, give it to Jennefer. And when I left Ketchum, this is an aside, someone said, I heard that someone said, if you give me Jennefer's clients, I'm leaving here. You know? So I decided to start the Borland Group so I could create an environment where I would want to work in. Mm-hmm. And initially, we focused in on real estate PR. And I took classes. I went to SBA. I went to SCORE. I spoke with other entrepreneurs. And I had an idea of what it was like to start a company. And I sent out an email to get my first client. And I sent it out to like 200 people. And I got one response back. And that was it. And that person said, my friend's sister-in-law is looking for a publicist. What did I have to lose? And I went and I met with her and she signed me. And that was my first client. And that's how the Borland Group came to be. And so we started to grow within the real estate space. But because of my tech background, I saw that real estate was getting too bubbly. That was around 2004-05. And then I realized I had to diversify. And here's a lesson, because I have, in my years of leading the Borland Group, I have become a mentor to women in the workplace, other entrepreneurs. And I feel it's very important for me because I've been very blessed in what I've been able to do, what has been given to me. And I feel it's incumbent upon me to give back. So I always say to women entrepreneurs, or any entrepreneur, have multiple streams of revenue. Always think long-term. Just because everything is going well at that moment doesn't mean that it's going to continue, because nobody foresaw the Great Recession of 2008. And you also have to diversify. So I diversified, and it's because of that that the Borland Group was able to continue. And I also started networking. I networked like a fiend, and that's when I began to do my speaking. So with the Borland Group, it's not just the public relations agency anymore, but I'm also, as I said, a speaker. I have a book, The Little Book of Big PR. I have contributed articles to Medium and Thrive Global, and I've been interviewed. I've created a thought leadership platform for myself. And with networking, I've given classes on networking, because here's the thing, especially for women, and I believe I mentioned it to you, and I'm sure that you're well aware of it. I'm in my 50s. And there was a New York Times article that came out that said that if you're a woman in her 50s and you lose a job, it's highly unlikely you will ever get hired again. And that is terrifying. There is ageism. There's a slew of issues and challenges that we women have to face, and this is one of them. We now have the issue of the pandemic, which, again, all of the studies are showing that we women are falling to the bottom of the employment pile, and that the jobs that were here just 5 months ago may never come back. And so with networking, what you can do is to use it to cushion that, because every business, every individual is going to go through a dip. And what I say to people is that no one will care more about you than you. So whether you are a CEO, whether you are a mid-level person or just starting out, you have to look out for you, because when everything hits the fan, people are going to be protecting themselves, and it's not selfish, but they're not going to be looking out for you. So networking is something that I do every day. I do it on social media. I've been doing it virtually, and it has worked tremendously to protect the Borland Group during the downtimes in the past and the fallow period that we're going through. And, right now, we are, managing okay. Oh, by the way, I've been asked, where did you get the name the Borland Group? Because my last name is Witter. And when my parents divorced, my mother, as soon as I was done with college, like within a week, she kept her name, Frida Witter. And the last name, he went, bing! And she took back her maiden name, which was Borland.
Oh.
Yes. And so when I started the company, it was around the time that I lost her. So I named the agency after her in order to memorialize her and to keep her memory alive. And I don't need to have the agency, but to keep her memory alive, but to introduce her in a way and to keep her living, so to speak, many years after her transition. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's wonderful. Oh, that's great. So one of the things we've been lucky enough to do together is some work on Columbia's Women in Leadership class. And
Yes.
Jennefer was just one of our key speakers this past week, in fact.
Yeah.
And at the time you talked about becoming a thought leader and what's necessary to do that and why it matters. And I thought maybe it might be interesting for our participants to hear a little bit of how do you define thought leadership, and then what are some of the things that go into it?
Mm-hmm. Well, being a thought leader, that has become in vogue within the past 5 to 10 years. When I first started out, nobody thought about being a thought leader, but it's almost become like an element on which to hang your hat and to differentiate yourself. And anybody can say that they are a thought leader, but who is genuinely a person who is going to influence and be followed by people? So basically what a thought leader is somebody who can, create a following, whose thoughts are recognized and listened to, who is on a platform where others look up to him and her for that area of expertise. And what I also said during the presentation is that you have to have an element of boldness. You just can't say, I'm a thought leader and stand against the wall and let the world walk by. You have to now, especially in this landscape, with the recent issues, not issues, that's a weak word, but with what has happened with Black Lives Matter, with the murder of George Floyd, there has been a sudden awakening in the United States, and CEOs, and this is in many newspapers such as the Wall Street Journal, that have said that they are now required to walk the talk. You can post all those black squares. You can say we are for Black Lives Matter, but those who want to be a thought leader are now being demanded by their staff, by their external audiences, to come up to the plate and not just say they are, but what are their actions? What are they doing? And so we have to take on that mantle if we want to be seriously thought of as a thought leader. And there are times, there's this increased sensitivity in this era, in this time, where there may be some blowback. One of the things I talked about was the former CEO of PepsiCo. And she noted in a conference that she made some comments that were considered critical, interpreted critical of then President-elect Trump. And PepsiCo people called upon a boycott of PepsiCo. And so there was a crisis. You are not going to please everyone all the time. But if you go out and say, I want to be a thought leader, you are going to have to be well aware of the consequences of your actions, what you say, what you do, because it may damage your business, it may cause loss of revenue, it may cause some of your staff to leave. So don't just say it, don't just think it, but think about, can you sustain it? Now, I'm not saying you're going to run away. As I said, I am an advocate for women in the workplace. And recently with AOC, with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, when she was confronted in the hallway by another representative who called her, a few bad words, and she spoke about it. And so what I did was I took a key passage from what she said, and I included a photograph of her on my Twitter page. Now, in my Twitter bio, I put down that I'm hashtag advocate for women. And I put this in specifically to support it and to say this is incorrect behavior. And within a day, I got over 3,000 views, and my footprint expanded and more people followed me. So that is all the elements of a thought leader. When you are willing to take a step outside of the line, being aware of the consequences. Now, again, I may be in a unique position because I work for me. And as I said, I'm not going to turn around and say, Jennefer, you're fired. It's not going to happen. Okay? I'm stuck with me. So if you're an individual within a company, if you have to answer to a board or if you have to answer to a CEO, one of the things that I said to the women who were part of this cohort that you were leading is, you can protect yourself. You can say thoughts are my own. Many of us, work for companies with which we hold their same values and morals. One of my former bosses, she told me this story when she was looking for a job just out of college, and she was at her wit's end. She wasn't getting hired. And this big tobacco company said, okay, we'll hire you. Now remember, she was running out of money. She was just out of college. She was in New York from the South. She had bills coming in. She could not do it. She goes, I just could not work for a company that produced tobacco. And so she held firm and she eventually got a job. So what I'm assuming is that many of us are working for companies that hold our moral center. And if you are working for a company that doesn't, that has been happening where it has to be an atmosphere where dissenting voices are heard. And you can do that respectfully. You can do it in a manner that won't agitate, but you can speak out. So right now, I saw a quote that you can't be silent. Silence is equal to oppression, and right now, in the times that we're living in, it is incumbent upon us to say something of what we believe in. And being a thought leader, if you really want to be a thought leader, and I said it's a heavy burden to carry, you have to be willing to go out there. And as the wonderful John Lewis said, make some good trouble.
Mm-hmm. So I'd be really interested in, the whole move towards racial social justice that's really just burst out in the last few months. Did that surprise you? And what's been your experience of kind of working through that?
Whoa, did it surprise me? With Mr. Floyd, I can tell you, that's nothing new to people of color. I can tell you that now. And I can tell you from my own experiences, nothing extreme like that has happened to me, but I have been racially profiled. I have been denied housing because of my color right here in New York City. I have been called the N-word in Boston. I was called a monkey on the Upper West Side. I have been told to my face that I must have learned how to speak well because I watched a lot of TV. It has gone on, yes.
And staple your Fordham degree to your forehead?
Yes, and even when I was at Fordham, other students there thought that I was there as a result of affirmative action. And I have no problem with affirmative action. One of our Supreme Court justices has been a beneficiary of it. But as I mentioned, I went to Brooklyn Technical High School, which if you're unaware of it, is one of the 3 specialized high schools in New York City. It's a STEM school, and I graduated with an A+ average. So, I was able to get into Fordham on my own merits, but a lot of people thought I was there for affirmative action, which again was implicit bias. And so we always heard about these stories. And, let's not forget that preceding that, there was Ferguson, there was Freddie Gray. Within the past 10 years, there was that gentleman in Jasper, Texas, who was basically lynched. He was tied and dragged from behind a truck while he was still alive. And there was a flurry of, oh my, oh dear, and then it basically petered out. Mm-hmm. So I think that the difference between now and then is that there was a video, mm-hmm. and we actually saw this man die before our eyes. Mm-hmm. And the reaction, I will be very frank, surprised me, because I thought it was going to peter out. Mm-hmm. And it's a refreshing and welcome surprise. But I have been around the globe many times in my life. And I've seen where things flare up and then they flare back down. And so I welcome this moment, but I'd like to see how long it is going to last. And it does seem like it does have legs, but again, we're in such a unique time. The pandemic, the upcoming presidential election, there are a lot of things pulling at us. And let's just see how this is going to play out. I can tell you that I have heard from many people in my past life who have reached out to me, who have apologized for things that they have said to me or thought how they have contributed unintentionally to bias, their own prejudices or fallacies, and they're saying now that we see. And one of the things I say in my implicit bias presentations is listen to what we say. I cannot begin to tell you how many times, I can only speak for my own experience, I have said this. This is what happens. And so many people will say, Jennefer, you're exaggerating. Jennefer, it was a random experience. And it was so frustrating. Mm-hmm. And now all the things that I have said that has happened to me is now being taken seriously. So when people say something, don't one off them, don't brush it aside. Listen, because there is a pattern in this. And if you're not someone who has gone through this, I can appreciate how you don't understand, but that doesn't mean that the door is closed, meaning that if it hasn't happened to you, it's not real, because truly it is real. Sorry, I thought I turned off my phone.
I have a checklist at home that I use because I get so many junk calls and robocalls. Yes. And all that stuff. I literally put the phone, like a friend says to me, "Oh, you're putting your dog in the yard?" I was like, yeah.
This is, and I have to say, and I do apologize, and it stopped. But it's like I usually do put it on silent, but it's just like, oh, okay. I put a note on my door saying, please don't ring my doorbell between 11 and 12. So like I halved out. So there we go.
Anyway, you were talking about listening, which I think is huge. I mean, I think for a lot of people, certainly that I've talked to, it's sort of like the scene from Casablanca, I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on here,
Surprise!
But I hear that a lot. So, I mean, I think people are by and large well-intentioned, mm-hmm. A lot of the people I talk to, but completely clueless. So how do we sort of make some progress without, what's the right word? I think, well, PR, right? So, I mean, people have to be comfortable with whatever the path is that you're suggesting they take mm-hmm. At some level. And so what are some things people can do? Mm-hmm. I mean, what are some things you'd like to see?
Well, first of all, they can do their own homework mm-hmm. Because, so many people have come to me and every time I talk, it's a wound that's being reopened. And it's one of me and many of you in the general sense. You can, read books. And one of the things I've spoken about that everybody's talking about white fragility, which is an excellent book. But one of the things I think that makes it more realistic, when you see people behind the numbers, it really comes forth.
Mhm.
And there is a book, it's written by Isabel Wilkerson, and I believe it won the Pulitzer. I read it. It's the Warmth of Other Suns. And it is a beautifully written book that details the great migration of African Americans from the Deep South, where Jim Crow reigned, into Chicago. And she lets people know why these people were leaving. Like, she focuses on one man, I believe he was in Florida. He left Florida because he heard he was about to be lynched and he needed to get out of there fast. And it's that kind of, you can read about those things with, again, the numbers, but when you see the actual impact of a person, it really resonates with you. I think that listening to podcasts, I talk about Code Switch. It doesn't just focus on Black Americans. It talks about Latinos. It talks about gays. It talks about marginalized communities. And it is a wonderful, wonderful podcast. There's a new video series, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And he has the host of it, his name is escaping me right now, but you can just Google the name of it, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And he has white guests on, and he talks about topics that can be very sensitive. And his last one was on interracial relationships. And, he started out with two couples, and the Black couple were sitting next to each other and the white couple were sitting next to each other. And he was saying, well, this is how traditionally it was considered in the 1950s. And then he switched them up. The Black woman was with a white man. The white woman was with a Black man. And he goes, this was considered illegal. And it wasn't until the 1960s that it was made legal, but it was still frowned upon for many years. And that resonated with me because, next month I'll have been engaged for a year. And thank you. And my fiance is white. And it was really interesting to hear what these couples were going through. And Lindsey Vonn was one of them. She's the Olympic gold medalist. And she said that even within her family, there was some disturbances over the fact that she was marrying a Black man. So, looking at these resources that are readily available, I would say helps you to understand. And one of the other things you can do to self-educate, there is this wonderful test, and it's given by Harvard University, and it's the Implicit Association Test, IAT. And you can go online. You do give your email, but don't worry about it because it's all anonymous. I have taken the test. And what you do is you go in, you register again, it's all anonymous. And what people can do is pick. It's like gender, it's race, it's sexuality. You pick one or all of them, whatever, and you take the test. Now, here is something that, and at the end of the test, you see where your bias is. And here's something that's really interesting. According to the results that they themselves have issued, 70% of whites prefer whites. Okay. However, 50% of Blacks prefer whites. And how I interpret that is that when you think of the word Black, think about all the negative words and connotations associated with it. Just the words, Black male, Black ball, Black sight. When we are little children, when we're reading fairy tales like Hansel and Gretel, they go into the Black forest. Who do they meet? A witch dressed in black who's going to eat them. And there have been many studies that have shown that Black Americans who are darker hued experience more racism than those who are lighter skinned Black Americans. And so it has been so embedded in us that we're unaware of it. So taking a test like IAT, Implicit Association Test, will help you to unveil in a comfortable, non-threatening setting what your biases are. And then you can take it from there.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting, this theme around color and skin tone isn't just an American thing. I mean, we have our own issues, but there was a study done of people in India. And in fact, there's a whole company, which I forget what they called the product, but it was some product that was meant to, it's skin cream, and it meant to lighten your skin, and that was seen as, a thing. And I think that's just really interesting. And it's got me sort of reflecting on not just slavery, but colonialism, like as a force in the world. And how pervasive.
Absolutely. Jamaica was a colony of England for up until the 1960s. And, I know it personally about colorism because my family is multicultural. I have cousins who are blonde with blue eyes. I have cousins who are dark as the night. And I have seen it where my relatives who are darker hued have a little bit more difficult time in the world because of the assumptions that are made. And again, it's not a free pass, for anyone, but you do stand out more because of the connotations with being Black and being Black in America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating. So one of our viewers has just said Fair and Lovely was the name of the product. And of course, I think it's owned by this huge multinational company. And so now they're kind of frantically trying to figure out how do we rebrand this, right? And things like Aunt Jemima and Butterworth and what's the rice?
Mr. Uncle Ben's.
Uncle Ben's rice.
Yes, yes.
And sorry, go ahead.
I had to unfriend somebody on Facebook because she is a white woman, and she goes, "What is this all about?" She goes, "They're taking away all these things from my childhood that brought me warmth and comfort." And we're not talking about the syrup. Mm-hmm. We're talking about Aunt Jemima, the woman with the bandana with the silly grin, akin to Gone with the Wind and the Hattie McDaniel character. Mrs. Butterworth being plump in this long gown. There is racist ties to those images. We're not talking about race. We're not talking about the maple syrup. Eat the maple syrup, eat the rice. I don't care. But it is the racial stereotyping that goes on. And like with implicit bias is prejudice of which we are unaware. And it starts when we're young, between the ages of 3 and 5, and it's tied around race and gender. And as we grow older, it goes beyond race and gender because we are subtly influenced by our surroundings, our family, our religion. So it keeps growing like a layer of an onion, and it goes to weight, it goes to sexuality, it goes to language, it goes to skin tone. And so when it is brought to your attention that you have this implicit bias, I'm not saying you swallow it whole, but take a step back and examine it and understand. So when somebody is, fussing on Facebook and continuously, even though I sent her an article about what the reasoning is behind this and still holding on, then it's revealing something of someone who I thought I knew. And to be truthful, my time is limited. And I don't have it to waste with people who want to remain in ignorance.
So I think getting more educated is a good place to start, and don't put the burden on your friends. I was actually on a board call last night with a wonderful group called Extraordinary Women on Boards, and one of the people that was part of this conversation is a Black woman who's on board. And she said, "Oh, I'm a double dip, right? I'm a female and a person of color. This is amazing." So she gets all these offers, right, to be on board. And she said she's completely exhausted because over the last month, like 55 people have called her, and she says to them, "Am I like the only Black person you know?" And so in my small group, I was like, that could be the case.
That is so true, because I believe it was CNN
Mhm.
that, what it said, and my numbers may be a little bit off, but I believe it's like 69% of whites live with other whites. And I think 49% of Blacks live among other Blacks. My numbers may be a little bit off. But the thing about it is that we're birds of a feather.
Mhm.
We stick together. And so what I say to people, take a step back, okay? Look at where you work, all right? Look at your friends. There was a great article that said, how many people have said that in the United States, you can see the greatest level of segregation during the hours of church because it can be so siloed, the Black church, the white church. But one of the things that I do, actually two things, whenever I go into a room, I look around to see how many people of color are there.
Mhm.
And for Sundays, it's one of my favorite things to do is to read the wedding announcements. And I love to read it and whatnot, but take a look at the pictures. Take a
Mhm.
look at the bridesmaids, the guests. You will virtually see 95% of the time that whatever the race is of the couples is reflected within, and we're talking, yes, friends, of course. I mean, family, yes, yes, yes. But look at their friends, look at their associates.
Mhm.
You're going to see the same thing across the board. And so we have to take a step outside of our self-created zones. And I spoke at TEDx in Albany in December. It was just before the holidays. And I asked the audience, which was predominantly white, raise your hand if you're going to go to any Kwanzaa celebrations. And, no hands went up. And, I said, okay, I'm not going to say why, but you know what? Why not? It's not like you're going to be carded at the door. You will be welcomed in there. And, just go somewhere where you haven't gone. I mean, in New York City, once it opens again, there's the Tenement Museum,
Mhm.
which is a renovated tenement on the Lower East Side, and each apartment reflects an immigrant's family story. Do that. Go to the Asia Society. In New York, we have, we had before the pandemic, the dragon boat races in Queens. It doesn't take a lot to step out of your zone. I will say that I did a presentation on implicit bias, and the question was asked, and it goes to show how we self-segregate. And it was a person, and I'm paraphrasing the question, but the gist is correct. I am white. I have a very privileged background. I don't know any people of color. And, why should all of this impact me? And we're talking about New York. We're
Mhm.
not talking about a state where there are fewer numbers of people of color in there. And that really made me think
Mhm.
because, he has to or she has to interact with people in the city.
Mhm.
So is he not seeing those who he interacts with who happen to be people of color as fellow connections? Is he even recognizing them? It was an astonishing question. And the other thing I want to say is one of the worst things you can say is, I don't see color.
Mhm.
A lot of people use that phrase to use it as an indicator. I'm not bigoted. I don't see color. You see color. Okay. How can you not? And it's recognizing and appreciating the differences that we all have.
Mhm.
So if you remember nothing from this, just don't go up to someone or say, I don't see color, or I have Black friends.
Mhm.
It sets my teeth on edge because it's showing something that you inadvertently and intentionally are showing.
Mhm. Mhm. So one of our listeners would like to know, how do you extend your network? Like what are some things you can do without being inauthentic? If you
Mm-hmm.
genuinely want to make an effort, what
Mm-hmm.
would advice be?
Mm-hmm. Well, I could say that, look at organizations that, and everybody has, I belong to networking groups. Look at networking groups and start reaching out to people within that networking group. And, don't say, I want to be your friend because you are, whatever. Just say, I read your profile. I think that you're very interesting and I would love to, see if we can connect over a virtual coffee or a virtual event. The same thing with LinkedIn. It is a glorious mosaic on LinkedIn. Go through your contacts and see who is there and connect. There is so much going on virtually nowadays. The name of the museum, the Schramberg in Harlem, is leading a lot of talks, a lot of events where you can participate as a member of the audience. There are so many things going on where you may have closed your mind to because you think, oh, I wouldn't be welcome there, or why would I go there? But you can go there. You can take a step. It's like one time, my then boyfriend and I, we went down to Lower Manhattan and we visited the Irish Memorial. And neither of us are Irish, but it was something that we were both interested in. It was very informative and very emotional. You can take baby steps, but one of the first things that you can do, that if you want to have human to human contact in this virtual world that we're living in, look at the groups, look at LinkedIn, and then reach out to people. Don't say, I want to be your friend, as I said before, but take that thread of interest and say, I would love to see if we could connect to discuss this a little bit more. And I can tell you that I would find that welcoming. I'm not going to see somebody saying, oh, I want to be your friend because, but it's opening a door based on a mutual interest.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. So let's talk a little bit about your book, because I know that's kind of a fun thing to chat about, and what you're working on now.
Well, the book is The Little Book of Big PR, and it's published by HarperCollins, and it's available as an ebook or as a soft cover print on demand. And very quickly, I got that book because I used to post on social media PR tips. And I pulled the curtain back because I felt it was important for people to know what was going on and that these tips may help people. And I got such a following, and people began to say, well, we think this would be an interesting book. And one of the things I want to say is that if you hit a brick wall, David Geffen once said this, go through the side, go through the back door, and if that fails, go through the window. A book agent was recommended to me, and he goes, okay, I'll help you. And he sent the book off to this publisher, and she said, this looks more like an article. It doesn't look like a book. And so I went back to him. I said, well, did you say this? Did you say that? And he never responded. And I was not happy. And so what I did was and with an associate of mine, we went through publishers, and we had no background, nothing in this. We selected a few, and then we were able to get Amicon, which was the publishing arm of the American Management Association, that published the book. They have since been purchased by HarperCollins, which is why the book is under that imprint. And so what I want to say is that if you hit a back brick wall, don't stop, because a good idea is a good idea is a good idea. And so with this book, I divided it up into multiple chapters of the topics I'm asked about, like media relations, personal branding, networking, social media. You can read the chapter that you want to focus in on for your small business or for yourself, or you can read the entire book. And all of these tips are actionable. Anyone can do that. And with each chapter, I have a case history that illustrates that chapter. And so that book has worked tremendously for me. I'm glad that it's low cost, because I wanted it to get to as many people as possible, because a lot of small businesses just can't afford an agency. But if you have this book that takes you by the hand to walk you through the steps where you will get results, that book is for you. And then for me, what I'm working on right now, Like many small businesses, I am, looking to maintain the business. I won't lie. I did lose business because of the pandemic.
Well,
And
well, there's not cash coming in the door, so that kind of puts a crimp on your PR efforts.
really, like, hello. But one of the things I've always said is that if you don't get, you don't. If you don't ask, you don't get.
Right.
And so I thought about it, and on LinkedIn, I put it out there that I was looking for clients. And because I'm very blessed, I still have clients, but not as many as I did pre-pandemic. And I put that all, and I was very careful with my language. I had it reviewed by a third party, and it was about 4 weeks ago. From that ask on LinkedIn, I have signed 2 new clients, and it was shared about 25 times within my network, and I've gotten multiple business referrals. And so I want people to listen that if you're in a tight situation, like all of us have been in, are in, do not hesitate to ask. Ask, and you will receive. And so we're working on onboarding those new clients. With the speaking engagements, I am addressing those. I've been speaking a lot on implicit bias. From the presentations that I've done, I've gotten requests for more proposals, so I am working on that. And so it's just, keep moving forward with everything. And obviously applying for grants, which is, something that's ongoing. And, again, because I feel that I'm so blessed with everything, I'm doing some pro bono work. Just for Success reached out to me.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and with many nonprofits, they're having a hard time. Their clients are women who, they're not senior level executives. They're trying to get a steady foot in the labor market. And they provide more than just dresses, but they provide them with educational tools. And so I'm going to be doing virtual presentations with them on virtual networking and personal branding. And so that's very important that if I can give back, I'm more than happy to do that. And again, because I remember my mother was a nurse, how difficult it was for her. My sibling and I never went without. My mother sacrificed. And I remember how she scrimped and she saved. And, if there was some kind of lending hand out there, to help her, she would have taken it. But back then there really wasn't, and she was so far removed from her family. So if I hear about, especially with single mothers, if I can help any way, shape, or form, I am there. It's like I said to the cohort the other day, you're stuck with me. It's like, once we're together, you're stuck with me, because I feel that when one becomes strong, all of us become stronger. And again, because of this pandemic, a lot of women are not going to have jobs to go back to simply because the jobs are no longer there. So what are they going to do? What can they do now? And with the $600 a week that is being removed from unemployment, the situation has become even more dire. So for those of us who are in a position to step up, again, it harkens back to the earlier part of our conversation, thought leadership. You can't stand against the wall and say, oh, tut, tut. You have to go forward and participate as much as you can.
So just for readers that may not be familiar with them, can you just outline what Dress for Success does?
Oh, yes. Dress for Success. It's headed by Joy Gordon, and it is an organization that provides clothing to women in need. They can be re-entering the job market, they can be formerly incarcerated, and they are, looking to get positions, obviously to generate employment. They're looking to get off the government assistance. But because they have lower income, they don't have the clothing necessary to wear. And so with Dress for Success, they receive donated clothing and they dress them from stem to stern. They, dresses, accessories, jewelry, shoes, but they also work with the women on their skills, like interview skills, how to write a resume, how once you get the job, what are some of the things you should be aware of? Because for some of us, this is all second nature, but for some individuals, it is not, especially if you've never been in a professional environment before. And so they provide them with financial learning tools, professional skills tools, business development skills that, yes, you have the outfit, but now you have the resources that will enable you not just to get the job, not just to keep the job, but to climb the ladder and keep moving and keep being a productive individual in your community.
That's wonderful.
It's a great organization.
Yeah, they really are an amazing group. So one of the things that brought us together was that you were working on, I think, a program for the 92nd Street Y.
Yes.
And I was looking for faculty for the Women in Leadership program. And I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because it's really not my area, right? I'm not an expert in that topic. My area is strategy and innovation. So I was a little bit at sea, and I'm like, well, who can I find that could speak to these things? And so that's how we came together. It was because I thought you had a very interesting perspective on what women need to do to advance, and the whole notion of building your own brand, for example. You know, something, and asking. You know, we had 42 women in the last cohort, and a lot of them were saying, you know, I don't want to ask for that promotion. I don't want to ask for that whatever. And perhaps you could comment on one of my all-time favorite things that women do. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
I'm so sorry. Oh, forgive me for taking up space. You know?
Absolutely.
I think that's what drew me to you, because you had a sort of a short sort of riff on that. So.
Yes, it was a video that was titled "Stop with the Sorry."
That's what it was. That's exactly
what it was. Yes, exactly. And you know, I talk about workplace language between genders, and I talk about the language that women use. And you know, sometimes we self-sabotage by the words that we use that don't reinforce our strength and our positioning within the workplace. And one of the things that we do, and I'm speaking broad brush, is to apologize. I'm sorry. You know, I'm sorry I'm late. I'm sorry I didn't get that. What are you apologizing for? Like I said, unless you burn the building to the ground, don't say you're sorry. Because listen, how many times, and ladies in the audience, I want you to listen in the future, how many times do you hear men say they're sorry? Okay? Don't say you're sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, I want to speak. Or in a meeting, raising your hand. You know, don't do that. And if you want something, ask for it. Okay? Don't say, oh, I'm sorry, I want to ask. Or don't say, oh, I would like to ask a question. Ask the question. Don't apologize. If you disagree, don't say, I'm sorry, I disagree. Because it minimizes what you're about to say. It minimizes your position that you fought so hard and long for to get. You know, will somebody disagree with you? Yes. All right. But you have your position and you're able to defend it. Nobody's going to agree with you 100% of the time, but it doesn't mean that you have to take a step back. And the other thing is that women in conversation, we are too polite and we don't interrupt. Now, and we're better at giving and receiving information. When we're talking with men, okay, it's studies, men and women think that we don't get interrupted when we do. With men, they are better at giving information than receiving it. So when we are trying to talk to each other, all these conversational patterns are conflicting because we are not aware of the genesis of this conflict. And also, and very quickly, because I want to be cognizant of the time, is that women who speak up, we can be dinged because we're being seen as too assertive, and it will lower our competency level simply because we speak up. Joan C. Williams is a feminist legal scholar with the University of California, and she did a study. And what she found was that women are walking this tightrope. They don't know, should we be considered feminine? Because if we're considered feminine, then we may not be tough as nails, when we have to make that big decision. But the other set of women were afraid of being seen as assertive because that is a masculine attribute. And we can be labeled with what? The B word. So it's like, how do we overcome this? And by training and knowledge and these studies, and it just can't be for women, men have to be aware of it too. So that all these conflicts that are happening, which are totally unnecessary, totally based on nothing, will allow us to move through. Because what I say is that when we're in a meeting, our voice is an underused tool. When you speak, you don't want to be heard. You want to be listened to. So if all of these things are happening, you are not being listened to. So you're not protecting your position. You're not sharing your great intellect or thoughts with your boss. Your career advancement can be delayed simply because we're not using our voice and we're not being listened to. So it's like all these things that take place in a conversational setting that is so dynamic that you're already talking about this report that you're giving, but there's all these other aspects to it that you have to be aware of. It's really, it can be overwhelming, but take it in small bites. And one of the things you can do very quickly is that if you're going into a meeting, and I've done this, and you're going to offer a new thought, speak to somebody else at this meeting, have an ally in that meeting. And then you go into the meeting and say, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then if somebody says, well, I think that's ridiculous, that person will say, well, I agree. And it's also like if I say something and 10 minutes later, a man says the same thing and gets credit for it, right? That ally can say, Ruth, Jack, that was a great idea. But, Ruth said it first. I thought it was still a great idea back then. Absolutely. So creating these pre-allies works very well.
Absolutely. My colleague Adam Galinsky talks about this. He calls it the low power double bind. And it's not just women, it's any low power group, right? And so if you're in a minority group as well as being a woman, it's like it compounds where, you don't want to be too assertive and you don't want to be too minimized. Yes. And that the dominant group has a much wider range of acceptable performance. Well, I could talk to you all day, but I want to be respectful of our time. Which is great. But I just, what a powerful message you have, and keep in touch. And thank you so much for sharing the hour with us. I really enjoyed it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much, Rita. And thank everyone who participated. Remember, you're now stuck with me.
And they can find you at the Borland Group website, right?
Yes, absolutely. You can always.
You're on LinkedIn, obviously, and all the usual.
Yes, LinkedIn, Facebook, just, look for me. We'll connect. And the more, the merrier.
That's great. Thanks so much, Jennefer.